Alrighty, guys. Welcome back to the iCoach podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, my boy, Jake Thompson, Mr. Compete Every Day, and a number of other things that I'm excited to dive into today. He's somebody that I met right when I got into the CrossFit space. I remember to this day, the first time that I ever stepped foot into that gym. I was looking for a coach or somebody to tell me what to do. I was so excited to work out. And I walked into this huge, like 18,000 square foot empty gym, only to meet Mr. Jake Thompson. So, dude, you've been a friend, you've been a mentor, really, somebody that's been a positive impact in my life. So I'm excited to have you on the show and be able to kind of dive more into your story.
Dude, man, thanks for having me on. I'm excited. It's been fun getting to know you and watch your journey, obviously, for the last 6 years, 5 years. It's been a fun ride to watch from my point of view too.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate that. Well, dude, so let's dive right into it. Obviously, probably my favorite thing to do with every single person that comes onto the podcast is dive into their story. Most people know my story, and that was something that I was scared to talk about for probably 8 years. And once I finally did, I feel like I talk about it all the time now. But dude, let's dive into it. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. So I grew up outside of Tyler in East Texas, so 2 hours east of Dallas. A smaller kid growing up. I think my senior year, I was 5'10" and a half, $150 soaking wet, which is not really what you wanted for your starting quarterback. But I was just being smaller. I always knew that I wanted to outwork and outsmart people to play. And so I developed this competitive side from a really young age to just play and beat other people, honestly. It was me versus you for a lot of my life. Went to college, got injured before I got to college, so never had the opportunity to play, just turned into a student, but my competitive side was still there. And like a lot of people, once sports end for a lot of us, whether it's football, whether it's CrossFit, whether you name it, track, we struggle really figuring out who we are. We have a real identity crisis because we are so attached to being an athlete or a quarterback or a CrossFitter. And so for me, that was football and losing that identity. And so college was an interesting experience for me of growing and trying to set myself up for success while still struggling with not kind of knowing who I was, really, if I got down to the core of it. But I knew I still wanted to be around the game and felt that if I could still be around football or still be around sports, even if I couldn't play it, that my identity could latch back onto that. And so I started interning at a sports agency. I started recruiting guys, immediately went from college to grad school so I could get certified by the NFL. And then about 2 weeks left before my grad school graduation, I quit the agency. I quit the guy I was working for. It wasn't what I expected. And to be honest, I was losing joy of the game. And the breaking point for me was I sat across from a guy at TCU that I'd gotten to know really well. And the scout said, hey, this guy's not going to get drafted. He can probably make a team as a free agent, but, chances are slim, which is a common reality for a lot of guys. But as I'm sitting there in that moment, I'm essentially having to look across the table at this guy and say, hey, listen, what you want is not happening right now. I can't provide you certain funds for training because you're not going to get drafted. No scout's going to draft you. You still have a chance to make a team. You can prove them wrong in training camp, but this is all we can do to help you get there. And it was like reaching across and grabbing the guy's heart and ripping it out of his chest. And it's a conversation you have to have as an agent with guys, but it's one that at that moment when I remember leaving the guy's house, I had to drive overnight to Louisiana for a meeting the next day. And in my head, I was like, I don't want to be the guy that destroys people's dreams. I want to be the guy that helps them reach them. And so I just knew I was out at that point. And so that ended up being the fall of 2008. Couldn't get a job to save my life. I had a non-traditional work experience. I had an MBA. Nobody would hire me. The economy sucked. And so I just started freelancing. I kind of still had that eat what you kill mentality from the agent world that I was just going to hustle and build up a consulting business. And so digital and social was really new. Nobody quite understood how to just build community and talk to people and storytell. And so I got some great consulting practice jobs doing that, helping telecom or sports teams build out social media, put together basic marketing strategies. Did that for a couple years, still not quite satisfied, still not scratching that itch I had to help people and pour into people until I read a book by a guy named Donald Miller called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. And in that book, he talks about the stories we live with our lives, great stories that we see in movies and books time and time again. Those same characteristics should also apply to our life. That if our life was solely about, or if the movie was solely about a guy wanting a BMW, and he clocks in at 9, clocks out at 5, in at 9, out at 5, no conflict, no adversity, no anyone else involved, just this guy. When you get to the credits, like, you're going to feel robbed, or you've left the movie already because there's nothing about that story that makes you want to cheer for the guy, to watch, or anything. Yet a lot of us live our lives that way. And so Miller argues that great lives have a character that's willing to step into the unknown, to conflict, to adversity, has a purpose bigger than just themselves, and is willing to invite others alongside them. And so when I read that book, I was like, this is what I'm missing. I don't know what it is, but it's a better story. And so I started exploring things, and then eventually my competitive side, still being there, got reshifted and reframed a little bit and saying, all right, how can I compete now against who I was? How can I write a story by helping people understand how they need to compete every day in life to be their best selves, to quit worrying about what everyone else says? And so from there, I just started talking to people about this message for 6 or 7 months, eventually put some money into some t-shirts and tanks, and started selling them behind our old CrossFit gym to anyone that would listen, and things kind of took off from there.
Wow. So I didn't even know about, I had no idea about like the agent thing. I mean, really, I guess my story, my understanding was like you finished school and then you like started this like t-shirt company.
No, yeah. I graduated TCU in 2006, my grad school in 2008, and then I didn't really launch Compete on the apparel side till May of 11. And so, yeah, it was the sports were always there. And I had some great guys, made some great relationships, got to know some awesome people. And the guy that owned the company I was interning at and working at is an amazing guy I'm still friends with. The agent that had brought me in, I rarely talk to anymore just because we disagreed on so much. But, yeah, that was kind of my wheelhouse, the Jerry Maguire route, and being around that sports vibe until eventually Compete. And Compete went 3 or 4 different directions before it became apparel. It was really my best friend, roommate at the time, saying, look at these guys out of Boston called Life is Good. He was like, they have a simple message. It's on t-shirts. He's like, I think your message could fit there. You're doing a lot in CrossFit and fitness now. Like, that's a market that wears a lot of t-shirts. Why don't you just give it a shot? And so that kind of what transpired it all.
Wow. That's awesome, man. So it's always really interesting, like the environment that you're in, like going through something like that, right? So like you had these friends that you're going to school with, and this was at like while y'all were doing y'all's MBA, is that right?
In terms of the agent stuff, yeah, it was the agent stuff was while we were doing our MBA, and it was night classes. During the day, man, I was in a hustle mode. So recruiting, the way that works, it's kind of like The Bachelor is what I laugh about. You have 8 to 12 guys every year that you're recruiting. And over the course of 6 to 8 months, 3 are going to break up with you. You're going to break up with 3 or 4, 2 just ghost you. And so you want to sit down with 1 to 2, hopefully sign 1. Well, that's a lot of time. And you're not always visiting campuses, especially when you're newer. And so for me, I was side hustling or learning like crazy because I had my days free. I had night classes for grad school. So daytime, I did everything from substitute teach and coach at a high school. Part-time, I worked for one of the pro sports teams in town, helping them with game day marketing, game day fan engagement. I would take the Adobe Classroom in a book that cost $1 million back in the day because there weren't all the YouTube videos. And I would just learn like how to do basic HTML, how to do graphic design, mainly because I knew on the agent side, I was at a smaller agency. If we wanted a shot with a guy to even just talk, we needed collateral that looked good. And so I would teach myself this graphic design stuff during the day and try things. And so it was a crazy couple of years because then I would be traveling on the road recruiting guys too. And so I got a taste of a lot of different things, which was great, but it just gave me an opportunity to learn and figure out where I could get better, which ultimately played into the whole path with Compete because the design and the web, I mean, when you're starting a business, funds are tight sometimes. And so what can I do? What do I not need to do? And so you start to figure this stuff out earlier on, which is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take it back to to childhood with you because I think like entrepreneurs and like I never knew that I was like an entrepreneur or anything like that, but like as I think back throughout my life, like it makes a lot of sense because I see all the tendencies. So, for you, for example, like I mean somebody that like just got like an MBA and something completely different, but then you also will dive into and like learn like graphic imaging and all that type of stuff. So like, have you always been that type of person your whole entire life to where like you just were like, did you have the entrepreneurial tendencies like throughout your whole entire life or?
So, spoiler alert, I'm actually a third generation entrepreneur. And I say that my mom's dad is a farmer in West Texas, had his own farms, cotton farms. My mom grew up working those fields. My dad's dad was a contractor, so he would do building and construction at airports and a bunch of stuff. And then my dad owns gas stations, convenience stores in East Texas. So when I was like 6 and 7, I was in the parking lots, sweeping the parking lots, cleaning stuff at the registers. And so like he had me working from day one. And what I always knew is at some point I wanted to own my own business. I wanted that, which is why the agent life somewhat appealed to me, because you worked for an agency, but you still were kind of your own beast. Because my dad never missed a baseball game, t-ball game, football game. He was always able to travel. My mom taught, but sometimes some years she would work for my dad. And so there was flexibility around that, which was incredibly appealing to me. But I was kind of always growing up, man, I was the kid that wanted the straight A's, that like wanted to be top of the class, because for me, it was like an opportunity to prove value. And that's how I was early on with that competitive side. And so as an entrepreneur, like you kind of love the idea of building something. And part of it is that idea, I want to be able to build something. It gives me, a sense of pride and accomplishment. Part of it was just a work ethic that I think my dad and parents have instilled in me from a young age of like, you've got to get things done. And like, sometimes other people aren't going to do it. And when I would get into team projects in school and I would be the one that would have to do the group work, because we all have those group projects, like there's 5 of you and 2 of you actually do all the work and everybody else just does nothing. Like when I got to that point, I was like, yeah, like if I'm going to be the one doing it, like I want to reap the rewards. And then at the same time, when I saw my dad with his stores, like a lot of the employees at convenience stores are minimum wage type individuals. You've got them from 18 up to their 50s and 60s for a lot of times. And what I loved most is a lot of my dad's employees he had for most of my life. Like I still go back to East Texas and see the same people that I had when I was a kid. And so seeing how he treated people and talked to people and just handled all of that really inspired me to go that route, because he gave certain people opportunities that they might not have otherwise or might not have that good of a situation. And so as I was thinking about rewriting my story, especially when it went from consultant that was just a need, like I've got to have income, I'm not getting a job, I just got to bring something in, to actually starting the business, it was like, how can I impact people not only outside with the message, but how can I eventually build a team and a business that supports other people doing what they're good at, or allowing them to have income that they can go pursue other ventures.
Yeah, I love that, man. I mean, that's something that definitely identifies with me as well. I mean, I always go back to the story with Jason as to like, I wanted to go work for him and he basically told me no, but there was, to give more context, it was like, I saw what he was doing and like, I really wanted to be a part of a badass team. And he kind of called me out and was like, you keep saying that, but like, I can see it in you that you actually want to go and build like your own like badass team. And like, I just had this light bulb moment, because you're right. I mean, it becomes so much more than yourself at that point, like you really are building something, like, everybody talks about like finding fulfillment in life and like truly being happy. Like there's nothing in the world that like makes people happier than like helping other people and finding that fulfillment in that. So I love that, man. One thing you mentioned, and it's funny that you mentioned it, because this is a subject that we're talking about a lot now that we never really talked about before, but it's the identity crisis, right? So we're breaking this down and explaining it as like identity maps, or the identity mapping process. But talk about that a little bit in terms of like the identities that you've had throughout your life. like obviously as an athlete, but like talk about the struggle, because I've been there too and it was so hard, of finally figuring out that, Jake, no more football for you, bro. Like that transition, like talk about the mindset piece of that.
Dude, that was the worst breakup that I ever had, because it lingered for like years with me, especially like throughout college. I played some intramurals here or there. Like I could still throw, but I just couldn't take major hits on my shoulder. And I would have guys on the team be like, hey man, you need to come out to the team. Like your shoulder looks fine. Like come out and play. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can throw, but I just can't take a 300-pound guy taking me and slamming me into the ground with it, or it's just not going to work. And so like for me, getting past that was really hard. And I honestly don't think I even got past that until I got out of college, mainly because as long as I was in college, in the back of my head was like, you still have time. You can still go out and do that. Even though physically I couldn't. Like you still have a chance to be a quarterback. You still have a chance to be an athlete. And so, man, it honestly came to like a massive boiling point. For first year of grad school, my roommate and I still laugh about this. Like I had gone through a really nasty breakup with a college girlfriend that had been cheating on me. My roommate had gone through a same situation almost simultaneously. And like I went to where I was drinking a ton. Like when I was like, I don't have to go to class tonight. Like we're just going to drink. It's happy hour through the end of the night. And my buddy laughs that he's like, he knew, like we just kind of had the sit down of like, we got to change this stuff. When he came home from grad school class one night, it's still the funniest. And I'm sitting on the coffee table because we had Guitar Hero back in the day with the Xbox, and we would just jam Guitar Hero and play. And I was playing like expert level with sunglasses on, a thing of vodka next to me, and a hat on. And he was like, he comes in and sees me and he's like, okay, we're going to play tonight. And then tomorrow we're getting rid of all this. Like we are starting fresh. He's like, that's not who you are. That's not who I am. He was like, we're both doing it. But when I see you now in this moment, he was like, I realize what we're doing. And so at that moment for me, it really became kind of a shift in my faith and my perspective, and trying to figure out like, honestly, man, what I believed from a faith perspective. I grew up pretty conservative Christian background, Southern Baptist. I had gotten mixed feelings over the years just because of things I'd been taught growing up from the church, not necessarily family, but from the church. Wasn't pairing up with what I was believing and seeing in the real world. And so at that point for me, it was just kind of let's figure out who we are. And so I just started writing, like literally every day. Instead of drinking and doing some of the other stuff, I would just write. And I wrote like a massive book that I never wanted to publish because it's really bad looking back on it now. But it was just thoughts and ideas of me trying to grapple with different thoughts and feelings and things I was going through, and what does it really mean? What can I use it for? And so out of that, I started to see pieces of my life and where I was identifying as an athlete, or where I was identifying as a Christian, and where I was doing, and then where my actions weren't lining up with that. Especially like as an athlete, like I never drank in high school because I was like, man, I'm playing football. I need every advantage I have to play football. Football's gone. I still saw myself, but I was like, oh, my actions don't mind that and don't go that way because I'm not training as much. I'm not drinking. I say like I believe this, but then my actions dictate how I treat other people very differently to that. And so once I was writing and seeing a lot of that, I started saying, all right, well, who do I want to be? And at that point, I really started consuming a lot of personal development, growth type content of just getting a better picture on myself and even some of the language I was using. I just had a guest on my podcast that works with Spartan, and we talked about this. And a lot of it that I realize now was me shifting around what I was saying. Instead of I'm an athlete, I'm a quarterback, it's like, oh, I also play football, but I'm Jake. You know, I run Spartan races, but I'm Jake. I'm not a Spartan racer. And I got out of it for a while, and I was really good about it. And then we got into CrossFit. And CrossFit was the first opportunity for me to let that competitive side back out. Like I'd been playing intramural football, city leagues with guys, baseball, softball. But CrossFit was the day-to-day basis of like, oh, competitive juices are flying. And so I went through a stage of like, man, I'm a CrossFitter. And then I was training to make regionals for our team. And then I just started getting injury after injury with the torn lat and other stuff. And I started looking at it and said, man, I'm identifying myself more as a CrossFitter. Like I'm spending my day thinking about how I'm going to do in the workout that night, or the open, especially like stressing about a workout. I was like, man, I got to take a step back, completely back from this. My business is in it. If I'm not at the gym, I'm at an event selling t-shirts, or I'm around it because my office was up at that space. And so I literally started taking a break because I needed to physically remove myself from a situation to start reminding myself of who I was and who I was not. And it's not a bad thing. Like I love aspects of CrossFit. I'm not a CrossFitter. I love aspects of working out, but I'm still who I am. And so I try to remind myself of that every day instead of comparing my score with someone else, instead of comparing myself with you or Jason or anybody else out there that's incredibly successful. I just say, man, I'm Jake. I'm on a different journey. What can I do today? And so I really am intentional now about the different language I use. And my wife and I talked about this last night of, and someone says, well, I'm just a negative person. All you're doing is reinforcing that mindset versus saying, I'm having negative thoughts right now. How do I change them? There's a big difference between having negative thoughts and being a negative person. But when you say the negative person, you start to cling to that identity. And we give ourselves these identities and these stories. And so for me, it's physically separating myself from that space, but then just daily trying to be very aware of the type of language I use. And if I do come out and say something that doesn't align with my identity, if, man, I'm just a negative guy today. No, take a step back. I said that. But how am I having negative thoughts, and how can I change these negative thoughts? And then I try to change them with positive affirmation. Does that answer a little bit of your question on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love where you took that because, that's a really big practice that myself and other clients we have do, like through the journaling process, like, I talk about it all the time. It's like through that journaling process, like when you have those bad times, which we're all going to have, like being able to reflect back on the good times that you had in those certain journal entries, like are so powerful.
Yeah, you mentioned that. So I've talked about it a ton. The Best Self Journal was a game changer for me a couple of years ago because every morning you write what you're grateful for, and every night you write what you're grateful for. But then throughout the day, you have your top 3 targets, your wins, and your losses. And you're able to look at like where I misstepped. Like I missed one of my targets the other day because I got sucked into a rabbit hole conversation on Facebook in our community versus responding, shutting it down, and going and working on that. So I write that down. And as I'm telling some of our clients as well, I'm like, if you're 3 months from now having the same lessons, like we need to evaluate what you're doing. But the gratitude practice is the most important thing you can be doing because it just shifts that perspective out of, I'm injured, I can't do anything. Oh, my leg is hurt, but man, I'm grateful I still have the opportunity. I can go do pull-ups or push-ups. Like you just start making those little tweaks to your daily language, daily thoughts that reinforce the right type of identity that you want. And that was huge for me is the daily journaling. And so I'm glad that you guys talk about that and use that because it's huge. I even started this year writing a thank you card every single day to some past customer of Compete, some college friend or friend that I haven't talked to in a while, just to say, thanks for being a part of our journey or my journey. I just want you to know you're appreciated. Because I can send an email, but we all get a million emails. And so I sit down and do it, and physically writing it, man, has been a game changer for me on bad days, on stressful days, because I'm like, no, man, like I'm thankful someone had this impact on my life or my business. And so it's helped really dramatically change my thoughts around a lot of that.
Wow. I love that, man. We do actually the same thing in terms of like when clients start up, we'll write them a handwritten letter along with kind of like the welcome package. But you're so right? No, who does handwritten letters anymore? And like, that's why we're doing it, right? Like,
Yep.
But man, there's so many good points there and so many things we could probably dive into on it. But I love like hearing about transitions in people's life and going through these different seasons. I mean, like looking at you right now and then like thinking to myself of like the image of you, like with your Guitar Hero and like a bottle of vodka, like, it's just different, right? But like when I post that picture of me leaning up against the car after like being at this raid club all night, like people never would expect that either, But I want to talk a little bit about this because I think that this is something that maybe not as many people talk about, which is when you're going through a really, really hard time, what's your advice on not like beating yourself up too much, right? Like not sitting here and just like, like what you said earlier, like talking and putting these negative thoughts on yourself each and every day. Like, how do you get, like when you're going through those struggles, how do you not self-sabotage yourself? Like, how do you help yourself pull through?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I do, and I love the fact that you brought this up because it's been a big theme recently in our community and some of the videos I've shot. So the two most important things for me in that moment are positive affirmations and my next step. So on the positive affirmation side, when I'm struggling or when I know someone needs encouragement, what I always recommend is taking a sticky note and just writing like who you are. Like not what you're currently feeling in that moment, but like from a faith perspective, for some people, it's, I'm a child of God. I'm loved, I'm forgiven, I'm blessed. For other people, it's I'm strong, I'm confident. Like whatever those words are of who you want to become. Like who's that person you're trying to become? Not someone out there. I'm not trying to be Justin Murphy, but what are the characteristics of what your best self would be? I'm confident, I'm strong, I don't care what other people think. Like I'm locked in. And so I have people put those on sticky notes and put them on your bathroom mirror, on your office computer or desk, and in your car. Because you're going to see them multiple times throughout the day. And it's usually the first thing you see in the morning and the last thing you see at night. And just reading it over and over again to reaffirm it. My buddy James Leith talks about taking intentional actions every day of just in that moment, if I'm struggling, if I'm just sucking at life in a few areas, reminding myself with the sticky notes, who is the person I want to become and what would they do? Well, the person I wanted to become won't whine about the situation they're in, dealing with debt or dealing with loss. They're going to think about how can I get out of it or how can I be in a better situation? So the first part is positive affirmations, reaffirming that because it's so powerful. And a lot of times, even early on when I was younger, like I might have laughed some of that off until you repeat it over and over again. You start to see like our words and thoughts become a big piece of who we are. The second piece of that is the next step. And when I talk about this is a lot of times we lose focus, we lose motivation, and we get overwhelmed and stressed, especially when things aren't going our way. Because we're looking at where we are now and how far we have to go. It's like being at the starting line of a marathon and realizing I have 26 miles left to run and I did not train. I'm in trouble. Instead of saying, okay, what's my next step? And for me, what I call the next step is tag. I call it playing tag because when I ran a half marathon, I didn't train for it. I thought I was fine until I got 2 miles in and realized I had 11 miles left to run and it was hurt, or my feet were hurting and I had a lot longer to go than I thought I did. And so I would pick out a runner a little ways ahead and start chasing them. And whenever I would catch up to them, I would just imaginary tag them. And then I would pick someone else and tag and chase them until I caught them and just did it the entire race. The reason it worked is my brain and fears and doubts can't keep telling me I have too far to go. You have to quit. This hurts. This sucks. You suck, whatever. When it's like, oh, it's a game. I can play a game. That's a little easy game right in front of me. And once you catch that person, you get that hit of dopamine. You get that reward for accomplishing something, and so you want to do it again. And so you move your vision off of how far you have to go instead of, oh, a game, let's just play it next. And so the reason our biggest goals and our biggest changes in life, they're not accomplished with one fell swoop, one massive action. They're changed with tiny incremental actions made every single day. And so for me in that situation, I went through a spot a couple of years ago dealing with business debt of just building Compete and inventory and apparel where like I was not sleeping. I was stressed. Life was tough for me mentally at that point. And everything I had to do every day is I had my sticky notes on the mirror. And then I just woke up and said, I didn't get into it overnight. I'm not getting out of it overnight. What's my step today? And I just focused on the one step. And then tomorrow, what's my step tomorrow? Because your brain's going to try to make you think 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps ahead. And so you intentionally just have to say, what's my step today? Who's the runner I have to catch? And your brain likes that because when we were kids, we played tag all the time and we loved it. Nobody goes to the playground to play a to-do list or to think 5, 6, 7 years ahead. No, they're thinking about playing tag and who can I catch? And it's the same approach with our life. And so positive affirmations, and then taking your focus off of where you have to go, how far you have to go, and just saying, what's my next step? Zoning in on that.
Love that, man. I repeat that line for us one more time about the overnight.
Oh, that we expect all the success and massive life changes to be like one fell swoop. Like we wake up one day and it's immediate. But like we didn't get into that situation overnight. We're not getting out of it overnight. Like we didn't suddenly gain an extra 100, 150 pounds in one day. And we're not going to lose 100 and 150 pounds in one day, whether it's physical weight, whether it's debt, whether it's bad habits. Like you change it one tiny incremental step at a time, one day at a time. And most people just get frustrated because they just keep looking at how far they have to go instead of what's my next step and look how far I've accomplished so far.
Yeah, man. I love that. I couldn't agree more. We usually kind of the same thing. I've said that, or we'll talk about, one bad meal never got somebody fat, just like one healthy meal never got somebody shredded. But there are so many good points and so many good takeaways that hopefully, those of you that are watching this or listening, like go back and like actually take notes and actually try to apply these practices. And, with any recommendation, like you can't expect to just love it the first time that you try it. Like you got to give it some time, especially with daily journaling. I mean, that's something that a lot of people struggle to kind of get into consistently. But, whatever type of personal development it is, like obviously, I know how much or how powerful and how much of an impact it's made on my life. And I know you can say the same thing. But what about for those people that maybe, I was just talking to a client right before this and they really struggle with the whole personal development thing. It's still kind of like foo-foo for them. So, I think both of us kind of got into it at a really early age, which, probably was a contributor. I think trying to get into it, at 20 years old versus 60 years old is probably a little bit of a challenge. But do you have any advice for people that, they want to do some type of personal development? Like they obviously want to get better, they want to be happier, they want to be more successful, but maybe they're just struggling to find somebody that they actually resonate with.
Yeah. So that's a big issue in the space that you and I have to deal with, that Jason and other people that work with mindset and development have to do, because there's a lot of crap out there. There's a lot of people out there, and I will get on a soapbox about this all day, but there's people out there that just be like, if you sit here and close your eyes and you believe it, it's going to happen. No, you have to do the damn work. Like you have to do something every day. And so a lot of people are so turned off by the word life coach, by the word personal development, because it's so full of people saying, just believe it and it'll come true. And that's not how reality works. Like believe it. Yes. Believe in what you're doing, believe in the goal, but there's still an action piece to it. And so what I would say is the challenge is more on guys like us and other female leaders out there in the personal development space to give examples and tell that story in a way that that person can resonate with, where it doesn't sound foo-foo and it doesn't sound make-believe. And so the best way I try to describe it to my friends that aren't into that space is look at it this way. You're given one opportunity at life. Somewhere deep down inside of you, you want a better career, you want better relationships, you want better health, you want a better life. Like it's there. We all have an innate desire to improve. The game plan is on us that are truly committed to being in this space, to telling that person a story in a way that sparks with them and motivates them to move. Because you're only going to make a change if you're motivated by the desire of something better, or you're motivated by the pain of the situation you're in. That really gets us out of that space. And so we have to continue to tell stories and put examples out there of people that might be similar, which is why if you look at really successful personal development, people that are actually doing the work, their audiences are very different because they're very niche audiences. Like the people that follow this person, yeah, they'll like some of this person's content, but they're not in that same community and tribe because they're talking to different people. Me talking to 30s that are active throughout their lifestyle, that want to be better in their career, their fitness, and their life. Like we're talking mindset and goals, whereas someone's not going to come to me initially if the start of the conversation's around nutrition, but they would you. And so you're having those conversations with them. And so honestly, I put a lot of that onus on us, is we have to have a way to have those conversations. And a really good example is I had a lady last week at a speaking event come up to me afterwards. And I talked about the idea of putting blinders on, saying no to everything else except the goals that you want for your health, your career, and your life. And she argued with me for about 10 minutes of the idea that saying no was bad. Like, you have to say yes to everything or you miss out on adventures. And we're going back and forth, and I'm trying to explain, like, you have to say no to certain things if you want to be successful at something else. And she's like, no, you have to say yes. And so finally I was like, okay, so tell me this. How long have you been married? I know she have a ring on. She's like, oh, I don't know, 20, 25 years. Whatever, I forgot what number she told me. It was over 20. I said, okay. How many men have propositioned you for sex in the last 20 to 25 years and you've said yes to? She just looked at me for a minute. I said, the point is you have to say no to certain things so that you can say yes to the best things. And I said, everything I've said before has not at all resonated with you. But as soon as I said that example to her, it clicked of, oh, I'm not actually missing out on things by saying no to them. I'm actually getting better experiences by saying yes. And so that's just one example. And so the onus is on us. It's on me. It's on you. It's on Jason. It's on Amanda. It's all of us to have examples in ways that can connect to that person where they are. They may not fit with our tribe and our audience and who we're trying to, but if it's someone that's in a position that we have to help, then we just need to be able to share that story in a way for them. My dogs are going nuts. Sorry about that.
Somebody's here to play.
Yeah, I know. They're going bananas. Hey, come on in. Come on in. Yep. Sorry. So if you can edit that, I would appreciate that. But honestly, the people that are, if you look at it and you take it out of personal development and you stop saying about like growth mindset and all of the terminology that we use interchangeably, and you just say, let's look at your habits. James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is beautiful in this because it is personal development, but he comes at it from an angle of how do we improve our habits on a day-to-day basis, incrementally, tiny changes. And when we talk about words that are not life coach, not growth development, personal development style, but they're normal everyday terminology, how does that go? And so that flips the script a little bit. So I use terms like grit and perseverance because that's something a lot of people outside of the personal development space get because of sports and because of life. And the same with habits. Like, we all understand improving our habits. We have bad habits. We have good habits. And so you just talk to them about how do you improve your good habits? How do we build on this? Well, that's personal development. You're improving who you are. You're improving that relationship, your career. But you're telling them in a way that they can better resonate with. You're using examples that they can better resonate with. And so you just work with that person to figure out what they know, what they're passionate about, and how can I communicate better to you? And then if needs be, who do I need to direct you to in this space that I trust that's putting out good content that you can learn more from, because that seems to be the style you learn best from.
Love that. Love that. Dude, I could probably sit here and spend all day Monday here talking to you and asking questions, but I want to respect your time. One more question I did want to ask, because I think you do a really, really good job. You've mentioned it multiple times throughout this interview, but if you could give entrepreneurs out there that are on social media, this is probably everybody, 3 tips for storytelling, for being a better storyteller, and whether that's through your own personal brand or with a company, what would those 3 tips be?
Yeah, so the biggest one I'm going to say is just transparency. The pictures, and they're all over the place, and it's probably not the people listening to this show, but they see them. People that go out and rent the sports car and take a picture in front of it and run all the ClickFunnels ads of like, ooh, be rich and wealthy like me. I rented this car for the day in this suit. Like, be honest. Talk about your wins as much as you talk about your failures, because audiences cannot connect if you're always talking about your wins by any means, because no one connects with perfect. We connect with the people that we know struggle, that go through the same things we do, that have the same thoughts, have the bad eating meals. Yeah. I mean, you've talked about it. Like, you ate chips and salsa and a margarita one night. Like, I'm not always eating perfect, and it's okay because no one can relate to that. So transparency, honesty is a big one. The other thing is, I would say, get your story clear, like who you are and who you're meant to serve, because once you know that, it helps everything else. And you're not here to serve everyone. I'm not here to serve that lady that argued with me at that speaking event, but I am going to help in that situation, but she's not part of my core community. And so the biggest thing that helped me is a book by Donald Miller, the guy that originally sparked the whole thing, called Building a Story Brand. And it's a book on reframing your perspective as a business or as a personal brand on what you do and who you help. Because for all of us as entrepreneurs, it's really, really easy for us to fall into the lie that we are the hero of the story. We want to be the Superman. We want to be Batman. We want to be Luke Skywalker. In reality, we have to be Yoda. We have to be Jarrell. We have to be Alfred the butler. We have to be the guide that helps the customer who is the hero. And Miller's book is fantastic at how he positions this and there's tons of free workshops or content online. And then he does actual in-person workshops that are paid you can go to. But what it's going to do is change all of how you communicate. And for me, I've had my business for going on 8 years. And when I read that book at the end of last year, we were already changing our logo and some of our language. And I changed everything dramatically because I tightened in on who we were for and as well who we are not for. And so once you know that, man, you can speak to that person every day of the week. And you know this from a content standpoint. Like if I know my person is somebody that's active, they're not crazy high-end athlete, pro, they're not somebody that never wants to walk into a gym or run, but they're someone that's active and they just want to improve in their career and their fitness or in their life. Like I know the types of things these people are looking for and I can speak directly to them because I know what they're about. And so get so clear on your brand message and story. That's big. And then third, I would just say consistency is being consistent on social media with the type of messages and the type of images you talk about. Some people, I feel like all they do is promote products and there's no transparency. There's no honesty. It's just, hey, what can I sell you today? And then other people are overly across the board transparent and the stuff doesn't align. So they may post like 10 different pictures and they're about 10 completely different things. And their audiences can't really get behind that because they don't really know what it's about. The best is if you're a business account, man, posting 70, 80% of stuff around your customers and customer stories and then mixing in 20 to 30% about yourself. Or, in the case of a personal brand like you or I, like mixing in, family pictures with pictures of us, with quotes, with things that align with the type of people we're trying to meet. So transparency, honesty is a big one. Finding out what your brand message is, be as concise as possible. This is not only going to help your social, man, it's going to change your website, your copy, everything you do will be around that. And then consistency in terms of the type of content you're posting and then how often you're posting.
Yeah. Fire. So much value. Y'all hear that, guys? Y'all better rewatch this and take notes because I know y'all didn't take notes before this.
Well, hopefully if they're driving, they're not taking notes. They'll listen to it a second time and then they'll get notes.
Yes. Always be safe. Always be safe. Jake, thank you so much, my man. Where can everybody find you at? Social media, website, podcast, all of that?
Dude, you bet. So competeeveryday.com is the hub. You can get the podcast, all social medias. We're most active on Instagram, Facebook, and then YouTube recently. And then for me, I'm most active in our Facebook group or on Instagram. Life is worth competing for. Shoot me a note if you listen to the episode. If anything I said you have more questions on, I would love to help anyone that listens to this show as a fan of Justin. Man, I'm just excited to help support what you're growing, man. It's amazing to see.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. Dude, it was a pleasure as always. And man, we'll probably have to get you back on here. I feel like I still have like 100 questions, but we'll go from there. Jake, thank you so much, my man.
You bet, buddy.